and welcome to our podcast series. This is our podcast number 2. As you may recall, we did our podcast number 1 with Peter Adams from Morrison Hirschfield. And continuing the podcast series, today we have with us David Underwood, past Society President, and Doug Cochrane, BRC Chapter President in the past as well. Doug and David, welcome. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you very much, Abhi.
Thank you.
Nice
Happy to be here.
Great. Why don't we get started? Tell the audience a little about who we are, and we will take it from there. So for myself, Abhi Khurana, Chapter President. David, would you like to get started?
Okay, a little bit about me. My background is, interestingly enough, I'm a civil engineer, not mechanical. And I got into the industry and I went to work for the train company and spent 6 months living with them in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And that's how I converted from being a civil engineer to being a mechanical. And from there, my ASHRAE experience is multifold. I've done a lot of work at Society. I've done a lot of work in the chapter. And I also ultimately became the Society President in 2015, 2016, which is a big thrill for me. Doug?
Hi, Doug Cochrane. I'm a mechanical engineer, graduate of Ryerson. Got initially involved with ASHRAE as a student in my last year, taking more on the thermo, and actually did an HVAC course in 4th year. Joined the chapter, and the initial reason I joined ASHRAE was to try and be better than my competitors on knowing what was going on in the industry, trying to be a resource for my engineering and contracting customers. Since joining ASHRAE, actually David is the one who asked me to first get involved on the board with the Toronto chapter. So going through that, went through the chairs, becoming chapter president in 2007-8. Moved on to regional. I did nominating for 6 years. I was also the inaugural regional vice chair for grassroots government affairs, and then was the director and regional chair for Region 2 from 2015 to 2018, and currently serving on the Decarbonization Task Force Training and Education Subcommittee, the Finance Committee, and I'm still involved with the Building EQ Committee.
That's amazing.
That's
Thank you. Thanks, David and Doug. And that's great, Doug. It was great to learn about how and why you joined ASHRAE. David, do you have an answer for that for us as well?
Well, I came at that a little bit different route. I worked for the train company for about 9.5 years. Didn't really have any interest in ASHRAE, except I kind of knew a little bit about them because they talked about ASHRAE in our training program. But then I left train. And when I left them, what I really found difficult was I had lost the training sources that kept me up to date on what was going on in the industry. And I got into the contracting side of the world, and I began by actually going to the ASHRAE Winter Conference to see all the new products that were being introduced. And that's where I first got introduced to ASHRAE, and I did that for almost 10 years before I discovered what was happening in the local area. Then I joined the chapter, and I became involved as well as doing society work at the same time. And I ended up being chapter president in 2002, 2003. And from there, I continued on with my career. And one of the big things I did that Doug is going to do this year, in 1998, I was the general chair of the summer meeting for ASHRAE in Toronto.
Wow, that's amazing, David. That's been a great journey, eh?
Absolutely.
We have a lot of similarities from that perspective, actually. I also started with train and quit to become a contractor.
Yeah, but the final thing I'd like to say is this year I will become a 50-year life member.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Congratulations.
The check's in the mail, David.
So I've been around half the life of the Toronto chapter.
That's amazing. Yeah, and it's our 100-year anniversary.
Absolutely.
How does that line up? That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, we'll jump into our next question. So tell our audience, why should we join the grassroots committees, the technical committees, and any other committees that ASHRAE may offer?
Doug, why don't you take this one?
I think what you'll find is if you join grassroots committees or get more involved with society at whatever level, you can learn not only professionally, but also personally. The ability to be able to, go through and develop things like leadership skills, public speaking, that sort of thing. You're getting intangibles, not just necessarily product knowledge or more knowledge of what's going on within the industry. So I think that's one of the key takeaways from being involved. I will say on the technical committee side, with over 100 technical committees, whatever your interest happens to be, there is a technical committee that's associated with that. And anybody can join as a provisional corresponding member and see if it's something you're interested in. You'll get the minutes, etc., and can decide if it's something that you want to pursue further.
In addition to that, in terms of those technical committees, one of the things is that as your career progresses from being a very young person in the industry, when you go and listen to the experts that are involved in these committees, you learn a whole lot about what is really happening at the high levels of technology. Then after a number of years, once you have, if you continue in that particular technical committee, you'll have a lot more experience. You'll have a lot more ideas. You'll know the applications, and you can bring that knowledge back to those committees to actually advance the society or advance what's happening in the general world of the built environment. So you have the opportunity to really make a great contribution to the world at large.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And we have so many members at our chapter level in Toronto that have been chairs and vice chairs of society level committees, that are chairs and vice chairs of society level committees as well. So that just shows everybody that there's room to grow anywhere you go in ASHRAE. So you should definitely get involved. So you both have been involved with ASHRAE for a really long time. Tell us about how the organization has changed over the years.
Well, I can certainly start with that one. I joined ASHRAE back in the 60s, and at that time everything was electromechanical and pneumatic. We didn't even have a computer in my university. DDC was totally unheard of. So I was starting off with the slide rule and with tabular information to actually do a heat loss and heat gain calculation. Everything was done manually, and you had reams and reams and reams of paper and hours of time. If you tried to model something, it took literally forever. So the best thing you could do was really cut it way down, and you got a very rough estimate of what was going on. So that, to me, is one of the major changes is going to DDC, particularly in the control area. But part of my issue with that control area is that it has ended up being with technologists who really don't understand system design and system control. We really need to transfer that information to the people who are doing the DDC information and developing these controls to really start to understand systems, not just equipment. So that's what I think has happened in my view from the years that I've been in the industry.
How about yourself?
In terms of ASHRAE specifically, I think we've made strides on the membership side, developing a chapter leadership academy, so people have an idea of how to lead the chapters. We've come up with the Leadership U.
I think we've lost Doug here for a quick second. David, I'm sure you can continue this Leadership U conversation while we get Doug back.
Yeah,
for a conference as well. So I think it gives a much better in-depth view of what's going on in society. one thing I think a lot of people don't realize is how much actually goes on at one of these winter or annual meetings. And I think, we're giving them more opportunities with these programs to be able to do it. The other thing that's happening within the industry is, this pandemic has showed that we're now more a, virtual world. We're doing a lot more Zoom, go-to meetings, whatever it happens to be able to be more inclusive to do things. And the Building EQ program, which I did chair, is probably the first product where the web, the portal, is the product. And that's, I think you're going to see more of that as things develop.
Perfect. Thanks, David and Doug. So all this knowledge and experience that you've gained over the last so many years, what, if you would like to boil it down, what advice would you give to somebody who's entering the industry today? Or maybe has been involved in the industry, but maybe not directly with ASHRAE?
My advice is goes back to one of the things that Doug said earlier. Things like leadership view and the interpersonal relationships you make during your involvement with ASHRAE, right from the beginning to your through your whole career. These things I put them down as what I call the ASHRAE MBA, and that's intangibles that you can't get anywhere else. I mean, how would you, as an engineer that's working for, say, a small firm, get to understand how to run a committee of international people? And you could get that in ASHRAE. This gives you experience you can take back to your employer, and that you can apply to your job meetings, your job site meetings, and make them run better and run smoother so that your jobs can go better. So these are the kinds of things that you learn in ASHRAE because of the fact that you're interacting with people from all over the world who have different ideas and different ways of doing things.
And I think Women in ASHRAE is a good example. Jennifer Leach had a vision back in the day to be able to develop Women in ASHRAE, and with that is now a standalone thing within society. So it just shows you that, if you want to get something done, it is possible.
I would also like to add to that a little bit about Jennifer Leach. When she had done this activity in the Baltimore chapter, the year when I became the president of ASHRAE, we were at a meeting in Orlando, and I brought her over and I said, Jennifer, I really like your idea. Please take it forward, and we'll support you in society. And it has developed, well, and it's a big, a big honor to ASHRAE, I believe, in our diversity and inclusion activities.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And especially in Toronto, that reflects so well where our committee is so diverse, and it's amazing working with such a great group of people. And you touched on a really good point there, David, about interpersonal relationships that you form. So maybe let's find out what kind of great or significant, impactful connections you've made over the years.
Well, I could start with that one. The primary goal of the business that I started in 1975 as a design build contractor in HVAC, and I emphasize R because the people that I hired through that period, they're all refrigeration mechanics. Now, it was a very competitive industry. So if I had a problem of some kind, I couldn't go to my competitor and say, how would you handle this? Because they'd scoop my job. Fortunately, in ASHRAE, I was involved with a number of people who were experts in that area, and I would call up people from around the world to explain my problems and actually, mine their minds to get information as how to solve those problems. And in the other aspect of that, I got returns from those people. We had a group of people around the world that we actually used to interact with each other to actually solve refrigeration problems that we had troubles with. So that to me was a huge benefit of ASHRAE. And all the money that I spent, because I was spending personal dollars, I was not supported by any company because I owned the damn company. And in actual fact, I got much, much more back than I ever put into it.
That's amazing. How about yourself, Doug?
I think it's amazing with the connections you make through ASHRAE, you know people from all over the world. And I know in my own personal thing, if I experience something on a job site that, nobody really knew what the answer is, I actually asked out to fellow ASHRAE members. And although they were competitors to Carrier, I'd ask, have you ever run into this and how did you go about it? And people were more than willing to help out, which I just think is phenomenal in today's world. So I think that the relationships you make through ASHRAE are there. People want to help each other get better.
One thing that's also truly emphasizes all this is all done by volunteer labor. We don't get paid for any of this. No, we have a $30 million budget at ASHRAE roughly, and we spend almost I think it's about 20% of it on research.
Yeah.
Now, this is unheard of. We're doing research to the point that we actually are almost bankrupting ourselves to actually give society information that they didn't have before.
Wow. So here's another question for you too. What certifications have you received from ASHRAE and how has that helped you?
Maybe I can go ahead with that one. I did have, I've let it lapse now, but I was a commissioning process management professional. And I helped develop the questions for the certification examination. And that was one of the things that my company did a lot of work with, was commissioning of buildings. And as a design builder, I always felt that I commissioned my work right from day one. And once ASHRAE was awakened to commissioning as being a necessary evil within the industry, because nothing was happening. If you went back in history, engineers used to do that work. But as their fees got cut and cut and cut, none of this was being done. So systems were not being properly put together and certified that they actually were workable. So we actually set up, first of all, I was on the original guideline committee for commissioning, and it's something that I had a great deal of interest in, did a lot of work in it, and I got that that certification. And because I got that certification, my company got a very large job because we had the connections through that particular certification procedure. So that's my history with the certification program.
I have to admit, I don't have any ASHRAE certifications. A lot of that stuff was sort of after the fact, and because I was a professional engineer, it wasn't as important to me. But I will say, I think ASHRAE's come a long way. Coming up with that certified HVAC designer is something I really tells the industry that this person is qualified to develop and design HVAC systems. So on the building EQ, I've been involved with the building energy assessment professional and the building energy modeling professional. I think it's a key thing if people, want to say to somebody that I have expertise in a particular area to get that certification. Yes, there's an exam you have to take and you have to qualify every 3 years, but it's letting the industry know that you have the qualifications in a particular area.
Wow. And even just a general note for the audience, everything that we as ASHRAE Toronto generate, we're donating to research, and all of that money goes to research in Canada specifically. So if you have any questions, we have our research promotion chair, David and Brendan. Please feel free to reach out to them. So circling back to our previous topic here, we talked about significant and impactful connections, but let's touch base regarding what elements of ASHRAE do you feel are underutilized by members? Would you like to go first, David?
I would say what is underutilized is the knowledge that there's really great opportunity in the interconnection with people and the opportunities to grow by making sure that you get these interconnections at the chapter level, at society level, and at the regional level. And these interconnections through them, I have made some great friends over these last 50 years. And I can tell you that to me, that is one of those things that is really underutilized because people are afraid to go and talk to people. It's just not, is crazy because ASHRAE people are really open. We like to talk, as you can tell with this podcast. So that's what's underutilized. And I think it's more fear that causes underutilization of anything, which is not just in ASHRAE. That's common.
That's very true. How about yourself, Doug? Any comments regarding that?
I think there's definitely hesitancy if people don't know something or know where to go. But I really wish people would reach out because there's enough people, there should be enough people in your immediate thing that you can reach out. And if they don't know, they can reach out to somebody else. That's why we have sort of the regional team, that if the local chapter doesn't know, they can reach out to the regional team and can direct people where to go. ASHRAE staff is phenomenal. They will get answers for you. And if they don't know the answer, they'll get somebody that can. So don't be afraid to ask, and we'll try and get you the information and stuff that you need.
That's great advice. And with this, we're going to wrap up this podcast. Any closing comments for our audience before we end here today?
Go ahead, Doug.
I would just say to people, I encourage you to get involved. From my own perspective, and I think you'd find the same thing, you'll get a lot more out of it than what you put into it. So my advice is get involved. You're going to meet a lot of great people. You're going to learn things, and you're going to have a good time. And that's what it's all about.
And I would totally agree with what Doug has just said, but I'm going to add one more thing. During the pandemic, in March of 2020, I had a conversation with a gentleman in Athens. And he said to me, why don't you put together a bunch of people so we can talk to each other? So I called a guy in Hong Kong, a guy in Athens, a couple of people in the US, 3 people in Canada, and we formed this group. And we used to talk to we still do, we talk to each other every Wednesday morning for an hour. Now that couldn't be done without all the things connections we have made through ASHRAE over these many, many years. It has actually evolved where we used to just talk about what's going on with COVID in your area. We talk about ASHRAE stuff. We've actually contributed things back to some of these committees, and they have responded by saying thank you very much. And what we've done is we're not young guys and gals by any stretch of the imagination. And one of our buddies in Calgary, Eric Binder, has named us. We call ourselves the Dinosaur Think Tank. So let me tell you, ASHRAE is going to take you right to your grave if you really want to be involved.
I'm a baby dino, by the way.
So you heard it. Get involved, participate, don't shy away, and take your career to the moon. Thanks for joining in, everybody, and stay tuned for our next podcast. Take care.
Thank you, Abhi.
Bye now. Thanks for